Salam and welcome back everybody to our podcast, Unapologetic, the third narrative.
Our authentic and original initiative in light of the war in Israel and Gaza.
A platform where we will share our identities, experience, and views from the ground. So in our pilot, we promised to take people back, where it all started. And in order to do so, we need to take everyone back into our stories, to our identities.
Where we started.
Exactly. We're going to talk about how two people from the same peoplehood that have completely different realities, lived completely different two life experiences, but ended up crossing paths because we both have more or less the same vision. We're both Arab, we're both Palestinian, and we're both Israeli citizens. All these words, these terminologies, when we were kids, they're all blurred, merged together because of innocence, because we don't know, we're kids.
Yeah, and don't forget, I think people need to realize that we're talking about us as kids in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at kids today and social media that is present today, kids know a lot more than we did.
Yeah.
We didn't have the influence of social media. Our parents had the ability to shield us from a lot of these complexities and to give us the innocence of a child, which is not the case today as much. But for us back then, absolutely. We needed to go through a journey to discover our identities. So, as we said, we're Arabs, Palestinians, and Israeli citizens. So let's break that down, actually. Let's take one component at a time. Let's start with the basic one, which is Arab. Because, Arab is someone who was born to parents speaking Arabic. He speaks Arabic, and it comes a history of the Middle East. Even if you're born in the States, your main history is from the Middle East. So that's what makes a person Arab. So for you, Amira, when was the first time you felt Arab?
So for me, it's a little bit more unique. It's very much like centered around my upbringing, which started back in California, in San Francisco, where actually as a very young child, because like we said, there's a lot of naivety, there's a lot of innocence. I thought I was white. I thought I was a white American California girl. It wasn't the word Arab, it was more my religion, which I tied to the word Arab because everything that we learned, like my mom and my parents would talk to me in Arabic and I would reply in English. That's how much I was like connected to the States because it was everything that I started to know as home. But it's what I saw that differentiated me from my schoolmates. So the Arabic language, which was translated or linked to religion, because that's when I would use Arabic, is when I felt that word kind of forming. Mm-hmm. Even when during show and tell, and as a kid in the States, everyone would bring their pets, would bring their teddy bears, and I would bring a verse from the Quran to read. Because I felt like it made me unique. It made me different from everyone else. And then when we came back from the States to Palestine, to Jerusalem, it was, I remember asking my mom, I was confused. I was like, Mama, why is everyone named Muhammad here? Because all my cousins, I felt weird. That's when my Americanness came out and I was like, everything is Arabic here. Everyone's Arab here. And that's when I was like, that's the completion of the word? That's Arab? So that's when it started to be introduced.
And you connected to a community after when you actually meet an Arab community, right? Because
I wouldn't say connected.
Arab and the Muslim was together.
I would say was introduced to. I wouldn't say connected. I think every single word that we're going to talk about, I think it's a journey. There's no one specific moment where, oh, it's Palestinian. Oh, it's Arab. No, I feel like it's more of a journey. It's more of a takeoff towards understanding that, at least for myself, is continuing up until this day. But I'm sure you had a completely different experience, a completely different reality.
I mean, now trying to figure out when was the first time I realized, like we say, I'm Arab. I mean, it's our language. So For me, growing up, it's automatic that you're Arab because you speak Arabic. Like, you know that you're speaking Arabic. You watch the kids channel, for the Arab listeners, Space Tune and our teens in Arabic, and you realize, that this is what we speak. I remember, going to my mom as a very young kid, and she actually told me that story recently, that me and my sister would talk to each other in Fusha. Because we want to copy the cartoon, because in my mind, that's how we're supposed to speak in Arabic.
Yeah.
And that's like the first, like, when you realize your Arabness in a way. But I think when you realize that you're a community, was when I realized what is Jewish. I think they kind of came together to realize that not just that you're Arab, but there are people who are different than you. That's when I was introduced more to Jewish people. And for me, it actually came very early on, because my cousins grew up in a Jewish town. They were actually the first to ever live in that specific Jewish town. And in the 90s, it wasn't prevalent at all to live in predominantly Jewish community. And my cousins did. And it turns out that their language, their first language became Arabic. Their first language actually was Hebrew. And the second one was Arabic. And growing up, your cousins are your best friends. And I would go there and sleep, sleepovers and all these things. But all their friends are Jewish. They're watching cartoon in Hebrew. And for me, Jewish was just someone who was just the same as me, who spoke a completely different language. And in order for me to get to know my cousins a little more, I had to learn Hebrew and to play with them and to play with their friends.
Wow, I had the completely different, because I came here from the States knowing English. I had the same experience, but with Arabic. I was like, in order for me to like interact with them, to interact with my own cousins, I need to understand this Arabness, this Arabic.
Because it's not just not just the language. There's a lot of slogans, terminologies, things that your cousins would use. That being in the U.S., I'm sure you weren't exposed to all these things.
Same thing goes for the Jewish slang, for the Hebrew slang.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, growing up, I started watching the kids' channel, and it's you learn the slang immediately. So my exposure was first to the culture, not to what Israel is as a state, as a government, not to any of these things.
How old were you?
I think when I started like actually speaking the language was even before going to school. Probably when I was 5, 6, I started already watching the kids' channel. And by the time I was in second grade or third grade, I would start correcting my teacher in Hebrew lessons. And she would get offended, and she would tell me, no, you're wrong. And even though I was sure I was right, because I already spoke the language. But I think the second moment then you realize your Arabness, not just as a different group, but as a political issue, was in the Second Intifada.
Oh.
It was the first time that you realized you're not just Arab and that's your language. You realize that there's a whole political problem with you being Arab in a way. Or that's how I felt as a kid. Because everything is because that's who we are. And I remember the Intifada, and I grew up in Nazareth, and we had, the Intifada arrived to our doorsteps in my neighborhood. We had clashes with the police between civilians and the Israeli police. 3 people got killed on my street.
Wow.
And I remember, it was in the 2000s, I was 8. And I remember telling my dad, we were on the balcony and you're hearing the screaming. I asked him, why are you not going there? I think the perception is people are protecting us from a foreign invader. And that started to formulate as the other. And I'm like, okay, why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you protecting our home? That's what I actually told my dad as a little kid. And then I realized that there's a political thing here. It's not just your community. And I remember asking my mom, why are we born Arab?
Yeah. And
not just Arab. Why are we born Arabs here, where Arabness is not the predominant thing? And I remember asking that question to my mom about being Arab, not Palestinian, at that time. And from the Second Intifada onwards, I think that's where the word Palestinian, at least for me, started to formulate. And starting to understand more and more about our story, our history, the Second Lebanon War. And you realize, that there is a conflict because of the issue of Palestine. This is how you see it in your eyes as a kid. But the first time I actually encountered it as a real question was when I got a scholarship to go to the US in high school. I was an exchange student, and going, we were going to go live with an American family, live in an American home. And the idea was to break stereotypes. It was funded by the U.S. Department of State. And the idea was to break stereotypes about Arabs and Muslims from the Middle East to Americans. And it happened because of 9/11. It was a response to 9/11. And they asked us to bring a flag.
Oh.
And I had no idea what to do. I was a little kid. I was 16. And at that time, I had no exposure or a very minimal one to the Palestinian aspect of the culture deeply, to feel the connection to the flag as a kid. Because the flag wasn't that prevalent, at least not how I felt it in my period where I grew up. And when I was there, and then I decided to use the kafia as my flag, because I couldn't connect with the Israeli flag because it has Jewish symbols. I'm not Jewish. I can't affiliate. And at the same time, I didn't know how the Palestinian one exactly represents me as a kid. So I chose the kafia because it's the symbol of my culture at the end of the day. By then, I started to understand more and more about the Palestinian as a culture. And I wanted to represent that as my flag in a way. But that was really the first time. And, that's when you meet people because I also met Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza Strip for the first time. It was actually in Washington, D.C., taking all these kids, from all the Middle East. And we had a session in D.C. for a week. And I met people from the West Bank and from Gaza. And then you realize that your experience and reality is also completely different to theirs. Because, for those from our listeners who don't exactly know who our community is, we are Arab citizens of Israel, or Arab 48. It's two different terms that are used to describe our community. Or in Israeli rhetoric, Israeli Arabs. We are basically 20% of the population inside Israel. We're Israeli citizens. We have the passport. We have the nationality. So every fifth person in this country is Arab with Palestinian roots, which is something that sometimes people don't even realize. And so we as a community are in the same time citizens, because if we look at 1948, our grandparents who were in their communities in Nazareth and other areas of northern Israel today, they were Palestinians who were part of the Palestinian people who was seeking independence. And when the war started, some people were killed, some people fled, and some people stayed. And the people who stayed in that territory that became part of what became Israel are our people. And they remained in that place. They were under martial law for about 10 years, and then they were given citizenships. And we're the descendants of that. About 2 million citizens today. And this is who we are. This is 48. And the other group is your group, because we have West Bank and Gaza, who are both under the Palestinian Authority today, or today for the reality of Gaza is under Hamas, but it's under Palestinian rule. Jerusalem is completely different.
Completely different story.
And we're 48 and you're 67. So my question to you is, when did you feel Palestinian for the first time, or mixing with 67 to realize that you're not just a Palestinian, you're a Palestinian from Jerusalem, 67? When did you realize that is your identity in that sense?
So before I talk about my experience specifically, I think we should differentiate what 67 means. So before the year 1967, there was Jerusalem. East Jerusalem was under Jordanian rule, under Jordanian control, and then there was the 67 war. And meantime, Israel had control over West Jerusalem. And during the 67 war, Israel annexed East Jerusalem and therefore expanding the borders of Jerusalem. And then remained the question, what's going to happen with the Palestinians that live in East Jerusalem? Are they going to have Israeli citizenship, like the situation that happened with Arab 48 or Palestinians of 48? Or are they going to stay with, move? That was the situation. It was confusing. And of what's going to happen to the people of this land that live there. And the question remains until this day. residents were given Israeli residency, temporary Israeli residency, in the hopes of one day reaching a solution of knowing what's going to happen. But this rhetoric put the people of Jerusalem into a status of limbo. And now I'll switch to my story of when I felt Palestinian. So in the beginning of when my family came back from the States to I don't even know what to call it anymore, if I should say Israel or Palestine, but in our mind we came back to Palestine. We stayed in Ramallah, in a family house that we owned in Ramallah. And there, we would go back and forth because like half of our family is in Ramallah in the West Bank and the other half is in Jerusalem. So we would keep on going back and forth. And for those who don't know, back and forth means going back and forth through a checkpoint, which is humiliating, absolutely humiliating. And if we're removing the humiliation aspect, it takes so much time from your day back and forth, waiting in line, whether that's via a car or waiting in line physically. And until we moved into East Jerusalem, and we went back there. We got our things in order, and we went back into East Jerusalem. And I remember visiting my grandma in Ramallah. And one day we went and I remember my dad wanted to shower, or someone wanted to shower. And my grandma said, "Oh, there's no water today. We finished the water that we have. So you're going to have to wait. Or I can heat up some water for you." And then I've had so many questions for my parents. I had so many questions for my mom. I was like, "What do you mean they don't have water? Why don't they have water? Why are we different?" And then, of course, came like, "Oh, thank God I live in Jerusalem. Like, why is there a difference?" And then came the dilemma of, am I like Palestinian? I don't live under the same situations as people in the West Bank, which is mainly the Palestinian territory, is what we see as Palestine, or what is framed as only Palestine. It's like, am I Palestinian? I don't suffer the Palestinian suffering, even though I do have my own specific type of suffering, which is the suffering that a Jerusalemite goes.
So basically you're saying, you had a mix of Arab and Muslim, and then Arab and Palestinian in a way, and Jerusalemite. But you also realize that there are different identities that exist outside of that.
Exactly. It was all a mix together. It was the Muslim, it was the Arab, it was the Palestinian, but there was a question, like even when people would ask me, like I would say, till this day, Jerusalem, because it's so unique. It's so specific to what a Palestinian from Jerusalem goes through, that it needs that sort of recognition, in my opinion. And then I had an aunt that was that married into a family that lived up north. And it was so, now that I look at it, it's so interesting how we saw and looked at each other. Like I would ask my mom and she would tell me, "Oh, they're from up north. من الشمال. أهل الشمال. The people of up north." And to my young head, my country, or where I belong to, are the borders of East Jerusalem. And as I grew up, that broadened and broadened and broadened. And it was like, I was so intrigued by, wait, but how are they different? And then I started to learn little by little. There was no picture. There was nothing to differentiate, but I felt like there was a difference. The same way I saw a difference between my sense of being Palestinian and the ones of my grandparents that lived in the West Bank. And then I went to university. We're going to talk about education in a second, and we're going to talk about Jerusalem specifically later on. But because of the format and the system of education, it's extremely difficult and a complete different hassle to get into Israeli university when you're from East Jerusalem.
Why is
because
that?
of the language, because of the difference, and it's something very far away. Like we don't know. Because it's the other. You're going, like, it's a place where you're not familiar, and there's Mainly it's the lack of the language, lack of teaching Hebrew.
Do they not teach it as mandatory in East Jerusalem?
Some schools do, but it's not a thing. It's not a thing. Like you go into restaurants in East Jerusalem and it's Arabic. Signs, of course, municipal signs are in all three languages, Hebrew, English, and Arabic. But signs of places, of restaurants, of supermarkets are all in English and Arabic. And people don't like, it's not something we hear every day unless it's police, unless it's soldiers. So we don't have that, or unless we go to West Jerusalem to for either shopping or for medical reasons, for the bank, like for those kinds of things. And it's a big gap. It's something that cripples really Jerusalemites in general, to not just to integrate but to advance in life. So I didn't end up going to an Israeli university. So my only option was to go to the West Bank to study in a Palestinian university. So I studied in Al-Quds University. And I remember from the interaction of people, of how they act, so it was completely different from the Jerusalemites that I'm used to. And not just the dialect, but the culture of the people, how their lingo, how their body language, everything's completely different. And then their perception of me is also completely different.
You're different.
That I'm different. It's like, Ahl al-Quds. Jerusalemites, or the people of the inside, Ahl al-Dakhil, you guys have it easy. You're paid to live. You live for free. And I was like, what's going on? That's not the situation. So much misinformation. And I heard these things. It's not something that like was talked about. I heard these things with my own ear. Like people were talking about it. And then happened I would witness or live through Israeli raids of the university and run to cover from stunt grenades or from tear gas. And then I realized, I was like, okay, like, one, I feel more Palestinian.
You're starting to share their experiences
Yes.
that they're telling you about.
But two, at the end of the day, I go back home to Jerusalem.
Yes.
And that's also my own, like, it has its own scrutiny. From going back and forth every single day to university, which is supposed to take 15 minutes by car, and it takes so much more time because of checkpoints. So that's how everything like started to form for my Palestinian identity that still was merged with Arab, that still was merged with Muslim.
For me, and you touched upon it a little bit, for me, one of the, at least how I was able to connect with people and to connect with Jewish people early on was the language. The language is key. And language gives you exposure to culture, not just the ability to speak. You know, for me, the fact that I grew up watching the kids' channel in Hebrew, I would say Ladim, for me, that was not just to learn the language. It was, you know, they would have the regular cartoons that we all watched, but then they would have other things that are more culturally in tune.
I've never even heard of these channels.
It's something that, you know, none of my friends in Nazareth watched the kids' channels in Hebrew, except for me.
Yeah.
I felt outsider in that sense. When I
Yeah.
would talk about, you know, these cartoons, I would only talk about them with my cousins and their Jewish friends, but not with my friends. With my friends, I would talk about something on Space Tune or our teens, the Arab ones. Like I was a big nerd on TV, so I watched all three together. I was able to catch up to all three. So, but it gave me also an insight to the Jewish culture, because they, on every holiday, they would talk about the holiday, where it comes from, the cultural aspects. So I absorbed that, and it gave me ability to connect to people and to not look at them in a political eye, because from a very young age I didn't. And I looked at them as a people with a different culture that I'm fascinated by. But so my question is, since you mentioned that you know, language is a big barrier, when did the Israeli part of your identity come into play, and was the language a key element in that? And what happened in order for you to gain also one element that is also affecting on, you know, your part of the Israeli identity of yourself?
I think I'm still getting introduced to the Israeli part of my identity. It's still being explored. I'm still exploring all aspects of my identity. Like I'm still I'm still like picking and choosing because I think identity is something extremely complex and it takes a lifetime to actually explore and see what you like and if you want to like add your own element to it. When it comes to the Israeli part of my identity, I think it took me I'll tell you what happened with me exactly. Because I came as an outsider, speak with my English language, like you said, English, like language is a very important like tool. I came with my English, so when I would go from East Jerusalem, which was my little village, to West Jerusalem, I would meet people, hear them speaking English, and I would be like, this sounds like home. This sounds like the States. I'm gonna
Approach.
approach. So I would go as a teenager and approach, and we would talk in English, and it was an American accent, and it was like these people, and it was completely like normal to me, and it was fine. And I was like, oh, these Americans. And then I would go home, and I would see like occupational forces. So then I would come to learn that like how there's Jewish and there's Israeli and there's occupier. Because other than the checkpoints, that when it comes to a child, when it comes day-to-day things, you see it as normal. You stop saying that there's something significant, this is a change. Because it was influenced at a very young age, so it was normal to me as, okay, this is a shitty situation that we are in because we're Palestinian. But I didn't see anything outside of it. I wasn't like, oh, this needs to change. I was still young. I was like, it is what it is. But then I remember one day we moved to a new house. And a month later, I remember walking home from school and coming home to a bunch of soldiers clapping and hauling to the partial demolition of our house.
Wow.
And I was looking there, I was like, what is happening? And this is the first time that I, as a kid, was like, I'm gonna have my own room. I'm gonna like, things are going to change. And for us till this day, we have leaks in our house
Because of demolition.
because of the demolition.
Wow.
There was no prior warning. There was no like nothing. We bought the house from here, and then a month or two later, the partial demolition happened. And mind you, no one was home. They just came. They demolished.
Came and just demolished
Yes,
them. Wow.
no one was home.
You just arrived and seeing just soldiers outside your
Yes.
house, and what, your roof is gone?
And that's when I started like seeing, okay, there's something called ihtilal. There's something called occupation, and it's not just checkpoints. And it's called Israel. And that's something that we don't say that word. We don't say that word in East Jerusalem. It's like taboo.
It's al-ihtilal.
It's al-ihtilal al-Israeli, the Israeli occupation. There's no recognition of the state of Israel at all whatsoever. And to a point where if I wanted to say, again, where I was from, to avoid the entire shenanigan, I would just say, I'm from Jerusalem. Which strengthened my Jerusalem identity even more and more. But then as I grew older, and we're going to talk about peace work further on, I started working and I started meeting people from up north. I started meeting more Israelis, and I was like, okay, I'm very confused.
And
I'm extremely confused.
are you still confused?
I'm still confused. When it comes to Israel and the so-called democracy, there are many good faces. There are many good pictures of Israel, of situations where Arabs are given equal opportunities and like thrive. There are many good stories.
Yeah, I must say we're, at least in 48, we're 20% of the population. But if you look at doctors and nurses, we're
50%.
We're 30 in doctors and nurses, and in pharmacists we're 50%.
It's the pharmacists. That's
The
50.
pharmacists are 50%, and
But
lawyers as well.
In healthcare, generally, I think it's 50%.
Generally in healthcare, it's in the 30s.
Really?
30% of healthcare, between 30 to 40%, which is a
Okay.
lot.
For
We're
20%.
So we can succeed.
But you're judged by your worst image, which is something that a friend of mine told me, an Israeli friend of mine told me. And the worst image of Israel is Jerusalem, where you have people that are not citizens, but kept in some sort of limbo of suffering. Every single their life cycle is just this like cycle of like there are no actual like borders that keep Jerusalem, East Jerusalem in.
Like divided from the West.
There's no actual, not like the West Bank. There's no actual like border. But there is this like invisible like separation.
Crossing.
Yeah, separation crossing that you feel because when you walk from Damascus Gate, from Bab al-Amud up to Mamilla Mall, you go as a Palestinian, as a Jerusalemite, you go from a majority to a minority in a 5-minute walk.
Interesting.
So you go from your people, from your culture, from hearing the adhan in your ear, to people that don't speak your language. And if you're from East Jerusalem and you don't speak Hebrew, you're in Chinatown all of a sudden. And it's 5 minutes. So there is this barrier that separates it, that Israel has maintained and kept the status quo. Now, granted, Jerusalemites can apply for Israeli citizenship. I, for one, have Israeli citizenship. But I have a specific, I have a unique situation. I was born with it. But you can apply for it. But majority of East Jerusalemites, because of the status quo, because of the political situation, because of the Second Intifada, and because of 67, don't qualify.
They prefer to maintain their Jerusalemite
and some
status
also,
in a way.
Those who want, actually I read a statistic before the war that the percentage of people in East Jerusalem that apply for citizenship and want citizenship has increased. I don't know what has happened after the war. But regardless of the fact, if they all wanted it, it is of disadvantage of Israel to give them citizenship. And it makes it extremely difficult. Extremely difficult.
Wait, it's disadvantage to who?
To Israel.
Why?
Why?
Why you having nationalities is a disadvantage?
If you are in the government of the only Jewish state that has 20% Arab in it, this removing East Jerusalem without counting East Jerusalem, would you want to increase that percentage of Arab that can vote for prime minister?
By all means.
If you were Israeli, if you were a right-wing Israeli in the government.
I mean, first of all, what's the population of East Jerusalem?
The population today, there is about roughly 580,000 inhabitants of East Jerusalem. 61% of those are Arab Palestinian, and the rest, the 39% is Jewish.
I mean, it's a lot. It's a huge statistic. But if we look at Jerusalem, it's also very complicated to establish what's Jerusalem. I think Jerusalem needs its own episode, I swear. Because Jerusalem expanded. The refugee camps who were not part of the city before then became part of the city and increased the population of the city, which wasn't even included in the city in the first place. So there's so many elements to that. But, I mean, first of all, when we talk about discrimination and all these things, this is at its worst, because it's not you're discriminated because who you are and you're different and all these things. You're discriminated by law. Mm-hmm. Because I can vote in government elections and you can't, mm-hmm. right? But you can vote in municipal, but not in government.
Not in government.
So your ability to influence is much less. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem. And the state needs to figure out its own answers. I don't care if they have a problem with our voting increases. Hell, I mean, we don't have that high of a voting rate anyways. Yep. And the people of East Jerusalem don't even vote for municipal elections in that high numbers. So mm-hmm. if someone on the extreme right will use that as an excuse, it's such an invalid excuse for their fear of their own political power. And it's not my problem. Mm-hmm. That they're going to be worried about the numbers. We're here, we exist, and
it also maintains the population. Like people, it's not just not voting. These are people that don't have citizenship. Like they don't have a travel document. Some of them either have a Palestinian one or they have a temporary Jordanian one. Travel document, not citizenship. So they don't have Jordanian rights. They only have the Jordanian document that they can travel with. Others need to apply for something called a laissez-passer, which is like this travel permit, a temporary visa of sorts. which is when I was wait when I came across this privilege of mine when I took part in a student exchange and with my school. We were going to Germany, so we all needed to travel, and everyone was asked to fill papers. Which, by the way, it's a big topic, filling papers when you're Palestinian and you don't know what to fill in. But we filled in the papers, and then there was this like trip to the Ministry of Interior. And I was like, why? Why are we going to the Ministry of Interior? Oh no, that wasn't my question. I was like, why am I not going to the Ministry of Interior? Because me and another girl were sat in class taking these extracurriculars while everyone else in a class
Was on a field trip.
Quote
Unquote field trip
to the Ministry of Interior to apply for laissez-passer, for like travel documents in order to leave the country. So that's when I felt like not like that's when I felt the difference between so that's when I felt the difference of my Palestinian identity inside Jerusalem itself. It was like, okay, not only am I different from Arabs up north, from Palestinians up north, not only am I different from Palestinians in the West Bank, there's also here where there's a difference. I have Israeli citizenship.
Which most of your classmates don't.
Most of my classmates don't. To clarify, the only reason why I have Israeli citizenship, which is because my mom has it. My dad only recently got it after applying for it for years.
So even when you apply, it's not like they give it to you with a click.
No.
As an East Jerusalemite.
No.
It makes it sound that, oh yeah, Israel offers you to apply. So if I apply, I just get it in 2 seconds. But
no.
It's not like that in reality.
They scrutinized us. They literally tortured us. Like bring back and forth papers, giving us false hope. Mind you, we can't travel as a family. Because of the situation of my dad, because he's through this long process of applying for Israeli citizenship, they would tell us that your house is too small after demolishing half of it, your house is too small for 6 people to live in. We don't believe the information that you give us. There's something wrong. There's something sketchy. There's no way you use that much electricity. Like these are the accusations that we would be given. So they ended up sending someone abruptly, without prior notice, to our house to make sure everyone was there, and measuring our house.
Wow.
To make sure that the stats that we're providing is correct. And after a long process and a lot of money paid, my father eventually got it, the Israeli citizenship.
So, then I don't blame you for being confused.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just put it this way, with all these complexities and Jerusalemite, with your specific case as well, it's really difficult, and it's not easy. It's a journey that all of us have to go through, I feel, to decipher our identity. I can tell you that I was also very confused for a very long time. I grew up, we're Arabs in Israel as a kid. And then I think when I really started to really watch a lot of stuff in Hebrew, I used to consume a lot in Hebrew later on in life. I think a part of that started to influence as well my perception of myself, maybe pushing me a bit more Israeli, because everything I consumed from middle school to high school was like so much in Hebrew. Even when I would watch a movie, I would have the subtitles in Hebrew, not in Arabic.
Oh wow!
I would read it faster, actually, and actually that definitely influenced my perception, and I feel the Israeli and the Palestinian parts of me kind of like went through phases of different, one time this is higher and the other one, another period, another one is literally highs and lows for each. And I remember like one of the key ones was definitely what I said, in high school when I went to the US, it strengthened my Palestinian identity. And then I would go, and then when I went to university, it also, I had another exposure to more of the other Palestinian identities that exist out there, not only West Bank and Gaza Strip, but because I started my university in the American University in Cairo, in Egypt, in 2011 and 12 during the Arab Spring. Maybe one day we'll talk about more of the experience of going through a revolution in a country where you're supposed to go study. But I remember then that my roommate was a Palestinian refugee in Lebanon. And when we sat down and we started to compare the stories and compare our realities in life, I couldn't believe the difference that we have. I mean, first of all, just the fact that we have such a different realities was one thing. And the other was, I couldn't understand how we live here in Israel with a country that your perception, if you have a very hardcore Palestinian perception, you're in an enemy state in a way, or someone who is doesn't want your best interest at the end of the day. But I couldn't understand how I, in Israel, had more rights. It's not even comparable, because the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon have no rights. And I couldn't fathom that. How I have rights in Israel, while everybody's saying is the enemy and all these things, and a Palestinian is in another Arab country and he doesn't get any rights. For me, that was, I couldn't grasp that realization. And then I went to the US and I continued my studies there, because at the end of the day, we look at who we are at the end of the day. For Egyptian eyes, at the end of the day, I was Israeli. I was asked to leave Egypt because I was there in a revolution and no one wanted to give me a visa.
You were
to
the
continue
Israeli student.
I'm an Israeli student at the end of the day. And I remember, because I stayed extra time after my visa was, because I entered with a tourist visa and I was supposed to get a student visa from the university itself. And I remember that I stayed after the visa expired, and I got an official letter from the Egyptian government. And it was literally written like this. To the university, you have an Israeli student called Ibrahim Abu Ahmad. The Israeli student, Ibrahim Abu Ahmad, has extended his stay. The Israeli student needs to leave the university and the country. And they wrote the Israeli student like 5-6 times.
Wow.
To emphasize that. And I was judged as an Israeli there, not as an Arab. And I wrote a petition about, I'm Arab, I'm Muslim, and this. No one cared at the end. And I had to leave. And I think when I was in Egypt, it was part of the realization that, there's an Israeli element to my identity that is relatively strong in a way. Because when I arrived to Egypt, my Egyptian friends had no idea what is Arab 48. They had no idea that we exist. They were sure that, Israel is Jewish, Palestine is Arab. It's as black and white as that. And when I showed them my passport, people wanted to take pictures. They were mind blown that there's an Arabic name written on an Israeli passport. They couldn't believe it. But then I go to the US, and in the US, you know how the Western world is in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And because of Egyptian experience, and because I saw a revolution, I wanted to study international relations. I believed in the power of influence. And that's why I wanted to study that topic. And there I really wanted to study and understand more of my Palestinian identity. And that strengthened a lot. But then I go home every summer and I go work in a restaurant that is an Israeli restaurant in Tiberias. All my coworkers are Jewish. They're all friends of mine at the same time. And I made great relations with all of them. And then you realize again that, it's not as black and white as it is. And I was in that place of being so confused for so long, till the point, I think, where I reached my own clarity. Today, I believe I'm all of the above. I'm an Arab, I'm a Palestinian, and I'm an Israeli. My Arabness is the language, is part of being part of that Arab world. My Palestinianness, for me, is the culture, our internal culture, even in the north where, people feel we're so separate and different. But our culture internally, the food, the norms, everything for me, it was Palestinian. And the third one is the Israeli is also culture, because that's for me what Israeli is. If we talk about the fact that we're Arab, Palestinian, and Israelis, the Israeli element is the cultural aspect. It's not just that I grew up on the kids' channel, but it's also living with other Israelis, Jewish people, having friends, sharing, going to their weddings, going to their holidays, experiencing the holidays together. And I think also the other part of that is that just that realization that my reality as an Israeli is not the reality of a West Bank, is not the reality of Gaza Strip, and definitely not the reality of a refugee. Our reality is because we were born in Israel. And this is part of who we are. And that cultural exchange that we have is actually not just on an individual level. We do it as a community. And we as a community mix a lot of language. If you have two Arabs from the north talking to each other, half of their words are going to be mixed with Hebrew. There's so much Hebrew in our slang. So we merged our cultures together. We got some from the Israeli culture and the language. So that is part of who we are today. And by the way, it's vice versa. Jewish people use so much Arabic when they speak Hebrew nowadays. It's insane.
Have you heard them swear?
Well, they do the most when they swear, because curses in Arabic are more passionate. It's just what it is. And people love cursing in Arabic. I get that. But the second aspect of that is the fact that it's even more bizarre, not when they curse, is when they don't know that the word they're using is actually Arabic.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're sure that this is some variation of a Hebrew word, and they don't understand that what they're using are actually Arabic words. But this is how much our culture is mixed together in a way. But we as a community feel there's that sense, because we're Arab Israelis. There's that sense. You're either this or that. And if you connect to the Israeli side, you feel like you're betraying your Palestinian side. And I think this is why we as a community are stuck in that limbo, in these identities between, you have your limbo as a Palestinian, Jerusalem, West Bank. And for us, it's what's Israeli and what's Palestinian, and how do these things come together. But my feeling was, when I put all of them as part of my identity, and I didn't put one over the other. It's not like this is more than this, and trying to do that game of, one is more important to me than the other. I felt more personally secure. I felt more secure about my Palestinian identity, and I felt more concerned about Israeli identity. Today, even when I come to you and I would go to East Jerusalem, and I don't know, one of the soldiers would stop me. Today, I would talk to him like a citizen, not like an Arab. Not like a Palestinian, not like someone who is, worried what this soldier wants from me. I'll just look him in the eye and be like, what do you want? I'm a citizen, I have rights. And I needed that feeling. I needed a complete image of my identity in order to feel in that comfortable place. And it's the same thing for my Palestinian side of my identity. Now I'm much more at peace. And you still have your journey, so good luck with that. It's not easy to find the answers that you seek. And I'm sure I'll encounter that question for myself also more in the future. Like, it never ends. But I am in a place where I feel sort of complete. So at the end, Amira, this is what led to me, to this wholesome picture, I would say, of my identity. Taking all the above together kind of gave me clarity. Do you feel similar? What's your perception of all these three elements or identities merged together in a way?
All of these identities merged together. I'll answer it the same way that you presented it, of feeling all of the above. I feel all of the above because I'm not.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
No. So elaborate, please.
So I feel all of the above because I am not means that it took me to realize that I don't completely resonate with each identity as a whole, but with specific parts of each identity, and therefore have taken parts of each and made one.
Exactly.
And when I say, I'm going to go back to the black and white thinking kind of stuff. When I say I'm Palestinian, Israeli, and Arab, why those things don't clash?
Because you're not looking at it from political identity.
I'm not looking at it as a political identity, and at the same time, I give it my own twist. I give it my, I'm the one that defines what Palestinian is. I'm the one that defines what it means to me to be an Israeli, because I'm not completely Israeli. There are things in the culture, there are things in the religion of being Jewish that I don't resonate with at all. Biggest example is Independence Day. I'm sure you and I, we love our friends to death, our Jewish friends to death. But on Independence Day, I'm either on a Nakba march or in my room off of social media because I don't want to see that shit. Especially because our suffering isn't recognized. And that's when I Like when I felt like, yes, like at certain point I was like you said, there was like a high and a low for each one. My Israeli one was at a high, and then Independence Day came, and it rocketed down. So I am all, but not completely each one as a full one. So yes, I am all of the above. Like I said, still on my journey of discovering this all of the above. Maybe I'll keep, maybe I'll leave a few, but at the end of the day, it's experience what makes your identity. And I have that Israeli experience, I have that Arab experience, and I have that Palestinian experience, and no single person can tell me otherwise.
Absolutely. It's our experience. This is the way that we experience all of these things, you know. For me, the Israeli part is the culture. Is not to be Israeli as in being Jewish and singing the national anthem or going to the army or any of these things that are, you know, how maybe a Jewish person in Israel can see himself as Israeli. And maybe for him, maybe I'm not, because for him, it will resonate on certain elements that are not for me. But I'm looking at what I see in it. It is speaking Hebrew and having Jewish friends, and we live here at the end of the day together, and we mix our cultures. And you know, I would go to my friends for Passover. I love the cleaning part of Passover. I remember even when I was working at a restaurant, and
Wait, the cleaning part?
My favorite. I remember like at a restaurant, we had a rabbi. It was a kosher restaurant that I worked in, and the rabbi would like come the night before Passover, and he was like, okay, when Ibrahim is done for the tables, please let me know. Like that will be his last table, because I need him with me, because we want to work together on cleaning for Passover, because he knew I was passionate about it.
Can you explain what does that mean?
Okay, explaining. I mean, first of all, it's
just briefly.
Briefly, it's so on Passover. I mean, they clean houses, or when I was in a restaurant, from anything that is with what's it called?
Wheat?
Yeast. It's anything with yeast. So you had to clear yeast out of your facility. So we did that for the restaurant.
That's what you mean. Okay.
And they would put even the plates in boiling water, and I would ask questions about everything. It was a cultural exchange for me, learning what their cultural aspect of that religion, even though it's a religious holiday, there is a culture behind it.
Was it reciprocated?
That's a very interesting question. No, it wasn't. I don't think it was in the same way. And that's part of the problem. Yeah. Is because I have their experience, they don't have mine. And it's because I speak their language and they don't speak mine. That's literally part of the problem. I mean, it's two things. I think one is the issue of language, because it's important for our listeners to know that you mentioned East Jerusalem, and that it's not a prevalent thing to learn Hebrew in East Jerusalem. In Arab schools in Israel, Hebrew is mandatory. And we have separate education systems inside Israel for Arab schools and Jewish schools. And even in the Jewish, there's their own separation, which we're not going to delve into. But in Arab schools, Hebrew is mandatory. In Jewish schools, Arabic is not mandatory. Arabic is a few years, and then you can take it for the Bagrut, which is, I don't know, the equivalent of the SATs, maybe. So not everyone speaks the language, and when you learn it, you don't even learn it really for the cultural aspect. You're training future soldiers. You're training future intelligence unit members. Not people who will come and interact and mix that culture with someone else.
Of course, it's dangerous to generalize completely, but it's barely seen. It's not significant whatsoever.
It's whatsoever. We have friends who are Jewish and speak fluent Arabic. Some of our closest friends, but
most of which have Middle Eastern and North African roots.
Because they connected. Though I actually have a few friends who are from European roots, older, and they felt that they're actually religious. So they usually would vote for more religious Jewish parties. And actually my friend started to teach his two youngest daughters Arabic.
Oh, wow.
They would watch like me, because I told him a lot about me watching the kids channel in Hebrew. So he did the same for his daughters in Arabic, even though they come from a religious community, which is you don't expect in a stereotypical framework that would happen. But for him it was, I want to teach my daughters. And this country is not making sure that my daughters know the language. I'll do it myself. And I ask him, you vote for these people. They have the power to do the language, to make Arabic mandatory. And he said, I want it, they don't. That's part of the problem. And the second thing is, for me, is recognition. There's a problem of recognition. You cannot expect a population that's living in all these complexity of Arab 48 with all the complexity of Israel as a Jewish state. We're not Jewish. It's Jewish democracy. We're not Jewish. We're struggling to find how we can strengthen the democratic values to improve our own lives within this reality. But there is an expectancy to accept the states. There's an expectancy that we're Arab Israelis. There's, on purpose, the word Palestinian doesn't exist. It eliminates part of our identity. So how can the state expect us as a community to accept the state?
Yeah.
With all its complex identity that has a Jewish element that we don't resonate with. We're not Jewish. And it doesn't accept us.
It doesn't recognize us.
It needs to recognize us as a people. And believe me, the day that will happen, more Arabs in Israel, more Palestinians in Israel will feel closer to the state in that sense, because their identity was recognized. That's one of the first things that needs to be done in order to make a change in this reality.
And it'll bring a more peace between the people.
100%, because it's a top to bottom that affects bottom up.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of language. And it's something that we need to start doing, as soon as we can. And hopefully that will happen soon. So hopefully these things will change.
We interrupt this episode to express our heartfelt gratitude to our supporters and our Patreon members. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this is a reminder that if you join our Patreon community, you will have access to exclusive content and you will be the first to know when we have something going on in your city. So that is your reminder to join the Patreon, and you can do it with the link in our description. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it a lot. So I think we're nearing up to reality. We're nearing up to our current state, which is both of us right now working in, you with the background that you have and the experience and reality that you have, and me same, but on the in some aspects the parallel side. But we both ended up working in the promoting shared society, let's say. Let's not use the buzzwords that are used by everyone. I think something that we've talked about and a term that we agree on is shared society.
Absolutely.
Why did you choose that amongst all the options that you could have chosen? Why did you choose to enter this field?
First was the Egyptian experience, like I said. When you see 1 million people in one square calling for change and seeing the influence of that, it definitely gave me like a motive, and it gave me something to do. I entered college maybe thinking of going to psychology or something along those lines. But then I saw that. I left Egypt. I couldn't finish except for 1 year. But then I'm like, okay, I need to do something that it's meaningful for me. And I wanted to enter the political world. I felt that I have an ability to influence and to make a difference. And that's why I studied, also continued. Actually, when I continued, I wasn't even sure in what way I will contribute to my society, because I did my master's in Haifa University in Israel in national security studies. My thought was maybe to become a political analyst and to bring an analysis to the Israeli media that will bring an Arab and Palestinian eye that doesn't exist there. That, they have so-called experts on the Arab world, but they're not Arab. They cannot see it from our eyes, and they cannot bring the same message. And I wanted to be the person that does that. But the world somehow got me to the place where I am today, and now I'm working in the peace field because of my experience, because of the shared life that I had with Jewish people throughout my life, that for me was very a given. That we can live together, because I was able to do it. So why not? Why can't we? Obviously it's way more complicated than that, but I do believe in the immediate message of we can live together. I've seen it. I've done it. Others can do it too. I'm no extraordinary in that sense. And I've seen so many others who do the same. And I do believe we can expand that. Why did you enter the peace field?
It's more of not me choosing the peace field. I like to say that the peace field chose me. I was on a completely different path as the eldest daughter in a traditional Muslim Palestinian household. I was directed towards healthcare.
I can guess medical
Yep.
field.
I was directed
You're either a
towards,
doctor or a lawyer
uh-huh, or an engineer.
or an engineer. Things with titles. That's what Arabs like.
Exactly. This PC political stuff is like, oh, you're going to be a teacher when you grow up. Like, there's no future for that. So that wasn't an option for me. So in my first few years in university, I like gave in. I gave in to what I thought I wanted, which was medical imaging. So I was full into healthcare. I was doing great, but man, was I miserable. I wasn't happy at all. I didn't feel like it fed my desire. Like I was into it because I wanted to help people at the end of the day, but I didn't feel like it's the way that my soul really wanted to help people. I didn't feel connected to it whatsoever. Like academically, I would do.
Shocking. No, seriously, Amira, at the end of the day, people can look at you if they see our video on YouTube. You're a star. Like you're not there meant to be in a room in the hospital and looking at the scanning of X-rays. Very important job, but I definitely I see you as a political leader.
Mama, Baba, you hear? So that's what I was approached with when I was in like an alumni club of Access. Do you know the Emma East Access Scholarship?
Yes.
So I was attending their like monthly or bi-monthly reunions or activities, and I met a lot of people there, and one of them introduced me to a journalism program. And mind you, I was not there yet. Like I wasn't thinking about peace. I wasn't thinking about shared society. I wasn't thinking about the Israeli side, the other side whatsoever, other than the checkpoint that I was going through daily, and the police that were always around our house in Sheikh Jarrah. That's how I saw it. And then he was like, you should take this course of journalism. And I was like, I've never read or written an article in my entire life. What are you talking about? How am I going to go into journalism? And then he was like, you never know, just try it out. Maybe you'll work for them one day. I took the course. It fed my love for English to the roof. But also, it gave me a platform. It showed me that I felt extremely unseen and unheard in Palestinian society because of my views, because I'm a woman. I just felt unheard and unseen. That platform that was ambiguous to me, like I didn't understand that it was the peace or the word that I really don't like, normalization. Or I don't like how it's used. Normalization, I didn't know anything about that world. And then I was introduced to people that would ask me my opinion, people that would value what I'm saying. And that's when I realized that my society has to change as well, that I wasn't accepted in my society as a whole, and I was seen as a minority within a minority. And that's when I entered it. I was offered a job the same way as I quote my friend. I was offered a job a year later at the same institution that I took the course in. And that's how I entered the peace building field. And I remember my first meeting, this peace building organization talking about Palestine and Palestinians, with me the only Palestinian in the room. And I was like, that is so wrong.
It already shows you the problem of the peace building community that exists here, which is honestly part of the reason why we're doing this on our own and not with anyone else, and not with, we know so many peace organizations, and we work for ones. But we did want to bring our own voice because we see how, we are the minority within the peace building too. You're working with the Israeli counterpart, who is kind of the one in charge, in a way. And I think that's what ticked us off, both me and you, to, okay, we're doing our own thing. We'll put our own voices out there. No filters, not what people, no one can tell us what to do. No specific agenda, just what we think is right.
Yeah. So I went into the peace building field with my woman card up front. It's like, you're listening to me. I have a voice. I think things need to change. And you are being oppressed and oppressing others as well. So I had a message. I felt like I had a message to Palestinians, and I had a message towards Israelis. And I was extremely angry. I was angry. I was like, how could both of you mess up so badly and not see it? So I was like, I'm going to start with myself. I'm going to take accountability. I'm going to do my own research and educate myself on both. And I'm going to be wrong and then be corrected. And I'm going to be wrong again, and I'm going to be corrected. And then after a while, I felt like being in the peace building community, I was still simultaneously working in healthcare. I was decided to drop healthcare completely and go into peace building 100%. And I'm still learning day by day what has been done wrong and what terminology is being used in the name of peace that got us to this point. And I think, and I'm doing it unapologetically. I'm doing it unapologetically as an Israeli and unapologetically as a Palestinian. And the drive is me being oppressed by both sides.
Yeah, I completely understand where that would come from. I think for me, the one realization that I had, the fact that I grew up in that way and being exposed to Israeli culture very early and understanding my own and all these things, I saw that I had two eyes to the world. Mm-hmm. I had one eye that could look at the world from a Palestinian eye and one that can look at the world from an Israeli eye. And then I have the capacity truly to grasp and understand both sides because of the unique position of my community. And then for me, it was like, how are we not using this to be not the bridge, as have a friend told me, don't use the word bridge, because the bridge you cross and you leave behind. We shouldn't be the bridge, but we're the key to the conflict. Because we're the only ones that are both Palestinians and Israelis. We're the only ones who have the capacity. We're not there yet, but we have the capacity to understand both sides, to understand both narratives, to bring both together. Because you can see both.
I would add to that we don't just only have the capacity, but we're willing. We have the will to be not the bridge, but the link.
So I use the word key.
I think the word key
to unlock the conflict
gives us
the way
more,
I put it.
I feel like it gives us more
Specific role.
Yeah, because we're the link, but both societies need to change.
Absolutely.
That's the key. We're the link. They need to realize that the political solution is something, and the change within society is what's going to bring peace.
To bring it.
The political solution is like, we've seen it before. The political solution is just an agreement on paper between politicians. The actual change comes within the people when they have the willingness to see the other as not the other.
And that, for me, I use the word capacity because for me, the way I see it as a community, not as Ibrahim and Amira, as an Arab 48 community, because we're the link, because we have both realities, and we're also citizens, which is not the case for the 67. We can influence the government, which we haven't enough so far. That's why I'm saying we have the capacity, but we're not there yet. We have the ability to see the world from both eyes, but are we really as a community? I don't think we're there yet. I feel like I've got to that place where I can do that. And I want to urge others to do the same. I think this is what my calling was, that it's so easy to solve I can see both sides of the conflict. Like, how are you and the guys not seeing it? And that kind of pushed me to be like, okay, if they're not seeing it, I need to show it to people. Because it's not going to happen on its own. And people don't change on their own. That's why I also took it as my personal mission, I would say, to change views, to break stereotypes. Some people think it's, people need to change on their own. I disagree with that. Someone who's racist is not going to wake up one day and say, well, you know what? I just had an epiphany. And today I'm going to stop hating Arabs and I'm going to love everyone equally. It didn't happen in the US against, No white supremacist woke up one day in the middle of the night and was like, you know what? I just realized I don't hate blacks for black people for being black anymore. It doesn't work like that. Changes needed to happen, and people needed to break those stereotypes. And for me, this is a role that I think all of us have to take on ourselves. It sounds tough because it is tough, but they're not going to wake up on their own. The majority cannot change because it's comfortable in where it is. If you're the majority, if you're Israeli and all your life is Israeli and Jewish in that sense, why make the effort? You feel like why make the effort out of nowhere, out of thin air? We need to bring that effort. We need to change those views, and it's possible. The first day of a new waiter in the restaurant I worked in, and I was helping all the new ones, getting acquainted and all these things. She tells me, listen, just don't be offended. She gave me a heads up. Don't be offended, but I don't like Arabs. Thank you for the heads up. And I had two ways to tackle it. Either I don't talk to her because she offended me and offended my identity. And the other one is I will change your mind. And I didn't do it by lecturing her. I didn't even do it by explaining what Arabs are. I just acted normally, as if I've never heard that sentence. And I acted with her as I act with every single person I meet. 2 years down the line, 2 years later, I'm invited to her wedding. So you can influence people. That we can change. We can break stereotypes, and people have the capacity to change. And we have the ability to change people.
I want to ask you about, have you ever felt guilty for what you're doing? Have you ever felt, because of your highs and lows of your Palestinian identity and your ups of your Israeli identity, have you ever felt a sense of guilt that you were empowering one over the other, especially in their field of work?
I think once I reached that conclusion that I don't need to make these comparisons between the different identities, when I stopped looking at what comes before what and what's higher than what, I stopped feeling guilty. Maybe when I was younger, I would feel guilty about, being born here and not in the West Bank or Gaza or a refugee.
It's something beyond your control.
But it's beyond my control. And at least I realized that I can use my position to help. Like, okay, I'm in a different place. I'm in a place where I'm a citizen in this country. So I have the capacity to make something about it, to make a change for the good, for all my people inside Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza. That was a sense of duty that eliminated the guilt, I would say. Do you feel guilty?
At some point I did, because it's easier right now because I'm not present in the West Bank as much. So, or because and also because I recognize my Israeliness and know how to deal in certain situations. Like you said, towards a police officer, like, yo, I'm Israeli, and you treat me as such. And you get to know your rights. But before that, before I recognized my Israeliness, I saw it as pure privilege. I was like, I'm privileged by chance because I'm born with Israeli citizenship, but I'm Palestinian. And I wouldn't say I was Israeli. I would say I have Israeli citizenship, and that's just on paper. It means nothing. And then I had a discussion with my mom, actually, and I was like, is what I'm doing wrong? Like, is what I'm doing wrong? Should I feel guilty? And she was like, what are you doing? And I analyzed for her, I'm doing 1, 2, 3 in a technical way. And then she asked me again, what are you doing? Like, how are you helping the people? How are you harming them? And I was like, I'm not harming them. I'm helping them first of all, see the other side, and each and every opportunity that I'm provided with, I pass along. And I lead by showing people that this is where we can get throughout my journey. And she was like, there's your answer. Now, obviously, our parents, because they go through the political environment, which is like a dice here each and every 5 minutes, showing a new number, a new result, opinions change. Like, if you ask my mom right now, she might have a completely different answer. But I did feel guilty, but then I kept on seeing on what I was actually doing. And now, and we talked about this before, I'm not afraid to use my privilege. I'm not guilty of my privilege because I don't allow myself to turn a blind eye. And every time that I feel guilty and was like, okay, let's check ourselves. Let's see if we're doing something wrong. That guilt is extremely healthy. I feel guilty, and you acknowledge 100% that you are more privileged than others, but you're using that privilege, which is what we have right now, a platform. If we were somewhere else in the region, we would not be able to speak.
Not in that way that we're speaking to.
No. So we're using this privilege to voice, to direct towards a solution, towards shining light on both sufferings and letting us reach towards something that is towards human dignity for both.
And that's why for me, that privilege is a duty. It turns into a duty.
It is.
It's a sense of duty.
It is a sense of duty.
That I have that privilege, so I need to do something about it in order to bring back, to give back. Like, okay, I've been privileged in certain ways. I need to give back to my community. I need to give back to people who don't have the same privilege, who can't. Because guess what? In a different reality, I could have been born in the West Bank.
Yeah.
I could have been born in Gaza Strip. I could have been the one right now trying to get out of Gaza or God forbid, under the rubble. I know that. I'm aware of that. And because I don't have that reality, I need to help the ones who do, because I could have been born in that one. And I would have wanted others to help me. Mm-hmm. So I need to do the same. And that's, I think, in a nutshell, why we have that sense of duty to do this podcast and to bring this voice. And hopefully, we will bring in the next episodes also more points on the history of the conflict and also solutions, real practical solutions. There are things that already today can be done. So that will come up, and we will bring some of those things because it needs to be out there.
And there you have it, everybody. That is how two completely different stories, two people from different realities ended up crossing paths because of their mutual vision to shared society, to peace, and human dignity for all. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening, for tuning in. It was, for me at least, I have to say, a fascinating discussion to understand the depths and more things that I didn't even know about Ibrahim. We appreciate you guys so very much. Please continue what the advocacy that you are doing, and we'll continue what we are doing.
Thank you, everyone, again, for all your support. Remember, you can follow us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. You can also follow us on Instagram, and we'll have a LinkedIn and a Facebook as well this week. So you can see us on all these platforms. So stay tuned.